Well, there's youth t-ball, then baseball, then girls entering high school who may have long loved and played America's favorite pastime, and they're faced with a choice: quit or play softball. But some, like Wiess from East Longmeadow, see a third option: playing baseball on the boys' team. Carrie Saldo spoke with Aylee about her decision, and Ron Chimelis of the Republican joined them to offer historical context.
So it all started when my dad took me to my first game at Fenway when I was 3 months old. And
3 months old?
Yeah. And then I just started t-ball, and I worked my way up to baseball, and I've just stuck with it ever since.
And at what point did you realize, oh, I'm coming into high school and I might need to play softball, and you have to make a decision?
Well, the transition into high school was a big decision for me because there's never been a girl who's played on my high school baseball team, so I'm the first at East Longmeadow High School, which is pretty big, and it was kind of hard to wrap my head around that fact, but I definitely wanted to stick with it for as long as I can.
And you did. And we'll come back and talk a lot more about that in a second, but I want to bring Ron into the conversation. Ron, as you've covered sports, do you hear this story often from other girls who are, transitioning from having played t-ball and baseball like Aylee did, and then all of a sudden here it is, come time for high school, let's play softball?
Well, in one respect, it's not a new story because girls have been playing boys sports. I covered sports in the 1980s, and every time that happened, it was a big story, to the point where we in the media started to think we were exploiting it. The girls really just wanted to play, but everything was a headline. What's new about this to me is baseball. This is a sport that I have not heard girls locally playing, so it becomes a big story because of that. But this whole issue of having girls playing boys sports, occasionally having boys playing girls sports, it's no longer new, but as she mentioned, it's still difficult sometimes for people to accept it as easily as they probably should.
And so what has that been like when you first showed up for your first practice? Or did everyone accept you willingly, or have you had to sort of introduce yourself?
Yeah, I kind of had to be more of an outgoing person. I kind of keep to myself normally, but it's hard to do that, especially when you're on a team with 16 other 14-year-old boys. It's kind of hard to be outgoing, but I do my best.
What were they ever rude or mean, or how did they greet you, I guess?
Well, I have a few friends on the team, so they talk to me all the time, but there are a few of them that kind of just go in the corner and kind of stay with their friend group and not really talk to me or interact with me.
Has there been any challenging of the fact that you're a girl and therefore you can't be as good at this as they are?
I think they've seen that that's not a possibility anymore, that I think I proved myself enough, so.
Yeah. Ron, let's look at the history in this region. There was someone who played baseball way back in the 30s, is that right?
I wasn't there for that, but I'm told that her name was Babe Lasaki, and I met her once right toward the end of her life, and I guess she was a superstar athlete in all sports, to the point where she did play amateur baseball on boys' teams, I'm told. She didn't play in the high schools because they didn't allow girls to play in the high schools, and years later they were talking about giving accolades to the great high school athletes, and people in Chicopee said, well, we can't really honor her because she didn't play for the high school team. So I said, well, so you discriminated against her then, and now you're doing that again. But obviously in the 1930s, I would assume that people were even less accepting than they are today. She must have been spectacular just to be able to get onto men's teams and play in men's leagues and sports.
Yeah. How about for you? Did you have to convince any, coaches or the school that, hey, I should be able to play baseball here?
Yeah, I actually needed to send a letter to the MIAA to even ask them to let me even try out for the team. So when I got the letter back, that was the first go-ahead, and my school has been very supportive of me.
What did the letter say? How did you make your case?
Well, I just said that there's a very big difference between baseball and softball softball is not the game that I grew up in, it's not the game that I love, so I wanted to keep playing the game I love.
Ron, from a sports perspective, why is it that girls play softball and boys play baseball? Is there any sense?
I think it's mostly just tradition. It's the answer we give for a lot of things in society. That's the way it's always been. And there are similarities, but they're not the same game either. Whenever people object to someone like her wanting to play baseball or a sport like that, I always ask why. Why are you objecting? Think this through. Is there anything wrong with playing this instead of that? And to me, the answer is no. But baseball's on a bigger diamond. There are different sets of skills. It's not an identical game by any means. And so it should be more understandable that people want to choose one over the other instead of just being funneled into one or the other.
And so do you think that should be the case? Should more girls have the option? Do you think that other girls would pick what you did if they had the option?
Well, that's also part of the reason why I'm playing, is to help blaze a trail for future girls to play baseball, hopefully.
Yeah. Ron, in terms of pacing, you mentioned the diamond is different, smaller. Is that basically because the sort of prevailing sentiment is that girls aren't as strong, girls aren't as fast?
Well, I don't know if that's why the fields were set up the way they were. I mean, the pitching is different in softball. It's underhand, so they do it from a shorter distance. It's a very difficult sport, softball. It's not, to me, a secondary sport, but the fact that the diamonds were laid out differently, baseball diamonds were put together in the 1800s. Softball's become more of a 20th century and 21st century sport. So I don't think it was done as a discriminatory policy. I just think it happened that way. And these are two different sports on two different fields.
Yeah. Aylee, I know that you've played in the national tournament, and I read a newspaper article because when you went there to play, it's the same diamond that the Peaches played on, right? They're the famous, everyone knows them from a league of their own. And I read that you said that you felt like you could really sense them out there with you, and they were sort of whispering little tips and tricks to you. What did you mean by that? What did you sense from them?
So I've seen the movie a million times, and it's just like I've pictured them playing on that same field and all of the different plays that they make and all the different hardships that they had to go through. So just being able to step foot on that field really felt very powerful.
Yeah, great. And Ron, there's a strange local connection in a way to A League of Their Own, right, with Julie Croto?
Yes.
What's that connection?
Well, she was a coach at Western New England, and she played, I believe she planned to play at a school called St. Mary's, and she was a coach in other places, and she had a bit part where they were looking for true women's baseball players to play in that movie, which is one of my favorites. And it brought that whole league back into most people didn't even know that league had existed in World War II. That movie brought it back to life, and she was one of the people who played the players because she was a player, and she could give a role that was believable. So when they really needed good baseball players, they called people like her.
Yeah. Aylee, have you done any digging, any learning, any history lessons for yourself about other women that have played baseball? Is that something that's of interest to you?
Yeah, a little bit. I like hearing about other women who are doing the same thing as me because it makes me feel like they've blazed a path for me, so I'm trying to continue that on.
Now, where would you like to go next? You're going to play this later this spring, right? Somewhere else?
I'm going to a baseball tournament again for Baseball for All in New York in a few weekends from now. And then on May 31st, I fly down to Florida to play for USA Baseball.
And USA Baseball is what? Is like a farm league for women's baseball?
Yeah.
So where would you like to see the sport go?
I would like to see it be more accepting and more diverse.
Great. Well, I appreciate both coming in to have a chat with us today. Good luck.
Thank you.